When Rachel first moved to the countryside, everyone told her the same thing. You'll get used to the noise. Roosters at dawn, crickets at night, birds filling the sky with sound from the moment the sun touched the horizon. It was supposed to be loud, alive, overwhelming. But just beyond the edge of town, there was a field where none of that existed. No birds, no crickets, no buzzing flies. Just a flat stretch of tall grass and soil where sound went to die. The locals told her not to go there. They called it the field where birds don't sing. It was a story for children. It stopped being a story the day Rachel stood in the middle of that silence and realized she couldn't hear her own heartbeat anymore. Rachel Hart was tired of city noise. She'd spent years in a fourth-floor apartment above a main road, listening to traffic grind past at all hours, her sleep constantly broken by sirens and arguments and the endless thrum of people. When her contract for a research grant in bioacoustics offered her a chance to document bird populations in rural areas, she took it without thinking twice. The town of Miller's Run was small, friendly, and, as promised, loud in all the right ways. Mornings were filled with birdsong. Afternoons echoed with dogs barking and tractors humming in the distance. At night, frogs and crickets stitched a soft, buzzing curtain of sound behind every conversation. Rachel rented a small farmhouse on the edge of town and set up her gear. Microphones, recorders, a laptop loaded with spectrogram software. Her job was simple: capture soundscapes, catalog bird calls, measure how human activity changed natural noise over time. On her second week, she mentioned her work to the woman at the diner, an older lady with sunburned cheeks and a name tag that said, Mara. "You'll like it here," Mara said, refilling her coffee. Birds never shut up. Except out at Hollow Field. Hollow Field? Rachel asked. Mara hesitated, then shrugged. Field out past Carter's farm. Nothing lives there, nothing sings. Birds fly around it, never over it. You'll see it on your maps. Rachel smiled politely. Bad soil? Bad something, Mara said, suddenly very interested in wiping the counter. You want birds? Stay away from there, unless you like recording nothing. Rachel did not stay away from there. She noticed it first on a map. Out of habit, Rachel overlaid her GPS tracks with heat maps of bird activity. After a week, she could see clear patterns, dense clusters along the creek, patches of low activity near the highway, strong bands of dawn chorus in the eastern woods. Everything made sense, except for one jagged, empty rectangle just north of town. A gap. No recordings, no calls, no background buzz, just an absence, an angular wound torn out of her data. It matched a large field marked on the satellite view. Pale earth, faint lines of old tractor tracks, a fringe of darker trees around the edges. Hollow Field. One overcast afternoon, curiosity finally won. She drove down the narrow road past Carter's farm until the GPS cursor hovered near the blank spot on her map. A rusted metal gate sat half open, the chain hanging loose, as if someone had once tried to lock the field and then given up. A weather-beaten sign dangled from one corner, its original message long faded, only a ghost of red paint left behind. Beyond the gate, the field stretched out flat and wide, covered in tall, pale grass that somehow didn't sway, even as the wind tugged at Rachel's hair and rustled the hedges behind her. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was the sound, or rather the lack of it. Behind her, along the road, birds chattered in the hedgerows. She could hear their calls clearly, bright and layered. But as she stepped through the gate and took her first few strides into the field, their voices faded, not gradually with distance, but abruptly, as if someone had turned down a volume dial. After 10 steps, she realized she could no longer hear the road. No car tires, no rustling leaves, no insects. It wasn't just quiet, it was a void, a silence so complete it pressed against her eardrums like thick cloth. She snapped her fingers near her ear. The motion looked right. Her hand moved, but she heard nothing, not even the faintest click of skin on skin. Startled, she clapped both hands together hard. The air moved, her palms stung. The sound simply didn't happen. Rachel's chest tightened. She spun around and walked quickly back toward the gate. After just a few steps, sound came crashing back in, not all at once, but in layers, like someone slowly removing headphones. The distant rush of wind, the chirp of birds, the creak of the old gate in the breeze. She stood straddling the invisible line, 1 foot inside, 1 foot out. On the roadside, she could hear everything. On the field side, she could hear nothing, not even her own breath. She stepped backward until she was fully out, heart pounding. Her recorder had been running the whole time, clipped to her jacket. She grabbed it with trembling fingers and hit stop. "Oh," she muttered to herself, her voice shaky but gloriously audible. "You're tired. It's some weird acoustic thing. You're going to go home, listen to this, and it'll be full of wind and grass, and you just freaked yourself out." She drove back without looking in the rearview mirror. That night, she listened to the recording. For the first minute, as she walked from the car to the gate, it sounded normal. Rachel's footsteps crunching gravel, distant bird calls, a truck passing somewhere down the road. Then she stepped into the field. Everything stopped. The recording went completely silent. Not the faint hiss of background noise that even the best equipment always picked up, but dead, perfect silence, like the device had been switched off. For 3 full minutes, there was nothing. Then, right near the end, just as she remembered turning back toward the gate, she heard something. Not birds, not wind, not her own breathing. A low, drawn-out sound, so faint it barely nudged the spectrogram, like something exhaling slowly into the microphone from very far away. Except Rachel remembered one thing very clearly. She had been the only living thing in that field. The next time she went to the diner, Mara didn't joke about Hollowfield. "You went out there, didn't you?" the older woman asked, setting down her plate. "You've got what look? Like you're listening for something that isn't there." It was such a strange thing to say, and yet so precisely accurate that Rachel couldn't laugh it off. "What's the story with that place?" she asked quietly. Mara glanced around, as if checking who else was in earshot, then leaned in. "Used to be Carter's best field," she said. "Years back, before you were born, probably. Good soil, good yields. Then one summer, something happened. Nobody agrees on what. Some say lightning struck and the ground never cooled right. Some say government folks came and buried something out there. Others say it was cursed long before that. All I know is the birds stopped." Just like that. First the crows. Used to be thick with them, especially harvest time. Then they started avoiding it. You could see them fly around it, like there was a hole in the sky. Bees too, even the grasshoppers. Everything went quiet. Carter tried planting there for a few years. Crops didn't grow right. His brother went out there one night, drunk, said he'd sleep on the ground and prove there was nothing wrong. They found him in the morning standing on the edge of the road, shaking like he'd frozen solid, even though it was August. He never talked right again. "You're messing with me," Rachel said weakly. Mara shook her head. "Honey, I wish I was. There's places that have too much noise, factories, highways, and there's places that don't have enough. Hollow's the second kind. It takes sound. Takes more if you let it." "More what?" Mara looked her in the eye. "More of you," she said simply. That night, Rachel dug through local records, old newspapers, anything she could find online. Buried in the town archives, she found a 30-year-old clipping. Local man found in shock near Carter's North Field. He just kept saying he couldn't hear his own thoughts, the sheriff reported. Another, older, strange migration pattern noted by local farmers. Flocks begin avoiding northern acreage. "They fly around like there's a fence we can't see," a farmer said. None of it explained the recording on Rachel's laptop or the hollow sensation that had crept into her chest while standing in that field. She should have let it go. Instead, she decided to go back, with better equipment. This time, she went prepared. 2 high-quality field recorders, separate channels, a shotgun mic for directional capture, a tripod, a small set of in-ear monitors so she could hear live input. She told herself it was an experiment, a way to turn folklore into data. The sky was hazy when she pulled up, the sun a pale disk behind thin clouds. She set one recorder just outside the gate, pointing toward the road. Her control. The second recorder she clipped to her jacket again, its levels carefully checked. Then she stepped through the gate. The transition was instant. 1 second, the world hummed with noise. The next, it was like someone had stuffed her ears with cotton. Even knowing what to expect didn't soften the impact. Her brain flailed for input that wasn't there, filling the void with a faint ringing. She forced her breaths to stay slow, counted her steps, and walked deeper into the field. The grass brushed her jeans without making a sound. Overhead, she saw a small cluster of swallows veer sharply to one side, tracing a clean arc that kept them strictly over the hedgerows. Rachel stopped in the exact center of the field, according to her GPS. She raised the shotgun mic, scanning in a slow circle. The meters on her in-ear feed barely twitched. No wind, no insects, no distant dogs or tractors or planes. Just a flat line. She spoke out loud, just to see. "This is Rachel Hart, Test 2, Hollow Field Acoustic Profile. She felt the words leave her throat, felt the shape of them on her lips. The monitors in her ears relayed nothing, not even a muffled echo. A wave of dizziness washed over her. It wasn't just the lack of sound, it was the absence of confirmation that she existed in this space. Usually you could clap, stomp, clear your throat, and the air would answer back. Here, it didn't. It accepted her presence without comment. She stayed exactly 3 minutes, her arbitrary threshold for bravery, then turned and walked back to the gate, fighting the urge to run. The moment her foot crossed the invisible line, the world snapped back into being. Birdsong, wind, a far-off truck, her own ragged breathing loud in her ears. She didn't stop shaking until she was back in her car. Later, at home, she downloaded the recordings. The control mic, outside the gate, sounded exactly as expected. Noisy, vibrant, alive. The one she'd worn into the field was almost the same as the first time. 3 minutes of perfect silence. Almost. Halfway through the file, the spectrogram showed something new. A faint disturbance, too low to be natural environmental noise. She looped it, amplified it, cleaned it. Slowly it resolved into something that wasn't quite a sound and wasn't quite a voice. It was like listening to breathing underwater, mixed with the suggestion of words that never fully formed, consonants that weren't there, vowels that stretched too long. Closer to the end, another pattern layered on top of it. Short, sharp bursts, like birds calling. Except when she isolated those, they didn't sound like any birds she knew. They were too distorted, as if something was trying and failing to recreate their songs from memory. A cold certainty sank into Rachel's bones. Hollow Field didn't just swallow sound, it held onto pieces of it, and now it was trying to give them back. She could have sent the files to colleagues or written it up as an anomaly and moved on. Instead, she made her worst decision. She went back after dark. The town was quiet by the time she drove out. Most farmhouse windows glowed faintly. The sky was a smeared gray-black, clouds hiding the moon. As she turned down the narrow road toward Hollow Field, her headlights washed over the rusted gate, making the old sign swing on its chain. Even from the car, windows closed, she could feel the difference. The world outside buzzed with night sounds. Frogs, crickets, the distant call of an owl. But her body tensed as soon as the field appeared in her windshield, like some buried animal part of her recognized a predator. In and out, she whispered to herself. 5 minutes. She left the engine idling and the driver's door open, a thin lifeline to normalcy, and walked toward the gate with a single handheld recorder. The chorus of the night wrapped around her until she stepped through. Everything cut out. If the silence had been unsettling during the day, at night it was suffocating. It was like being trapped under glass. Her own heartbeat roared in her head, too loud, as if trying to fill the gap. Except even that sound felt wrong. Distant. She shone her flashlight across the field. The tall grass absorbed the light, turning into endless dull blades. No wind moved them. Her breath puffed in front of her face, visible in the cool air, but made no noise. She took a few careful steps, recorder running. The urge to speak, to hear anything, gnawed at her. "Hello?" she said softly. The word vanished the moment it left her lips. She turned to look back at the gate, suddenly terrified it might have closed. It stood exactly as she'd left it, a crooked rectangle framing the noisy, living world beyond. She could see tree branches moving there, hear nothing from here. That was when she realized she wasn't alone. It wasn't something she saw. It was a shift in pressure, like the space behind her had gained weight. The hairs on the back of her neck lifted. Slowly, against every instinct, she turned. At first, there was nothing but grass and darkness. Then her eyes picked out a shape about 20 yards away, a patch where the grass seemed to lean inward, forming a rough outline. As she stared, the shape seemed to deepen, as if the field itself had gone hollow in that spot, a depression with no shadows to explain it. For a moment, she thought she could make out something standing there. Too tall, too thin, more absence than presence, an impression of shoulders, a hint of a head tilted slightly, as if listening. The recorder in her hand vibrated, hissing faintly through the headphones plugged into it. She glanced down at the levels. They were spiking, jittering erratically, as if capturing noise she couldn't hear. A strange sensation crept over her skin. It felt like the air was brushing past her ears, testing them. She took one careful step backward. The shape didn't move. "I'm leaving," she said, though her voice never reached her own ears. "I'm sorry I came." In the corner of her vision, Something small moved above. She looked up just in time to see a lone bird, maybe a late flying crow, cut across the night sky. It flew in a straight line, on course to pass directly over the field. The second it crossed the invisible boundary, it fell. No flail, no cry, no struggle. It simply dropped from the air like a stone, vanishing into the grass without a sound. Rachel's body reacted before her mind did. She turned and ran, stumbling toward the gate. The silence around her seemed to thicken, like mud, slowing her, blades of grass catching at her ankles without rustling. She didn't look back until both feet were on the road. Sound slammed into her, frogs shrieking, leaves whispering, the panicked gasps of her own breath. She spun to face the field. Under the faint glow of the sky, it looked perfectly ordinary. But for just a moment, in the near distance, she thought she saw a small dark shape lying in the grass, wings splayed, head twisted at an impossible angle. Then the grass rippled slightly around it, not with wind, but with movement from below, and the shape disappeared. The silence inside Hollow Field didn't change. It stayed exactly where it was, waiting. Rachel left town 2 weeks later. She framed it as the end of her contract. She told Mara she'd gotten a better offer back in the city. She smiled through the small goodbye party at the diner, accepted hugs and promises to come back and visit. She didn't tell anyone that she'd started waking up at night in her farmhouse, heart racing, convinced she was back in the field. She didn't tell them about the new recordings, the ones she'd made unintentionally, when her equipment picked up sound outside her window at 3 a.m. They all looked the same on the spectrogram. 3 or 4 minutes of normal rural noise, then a sudden dip, a spreading patch of absence, like a piece of hollow field had followed her home. In those moments, when the void bled into her audio files, she sometimes heard that same faint underwater breathing layered just beneath the silence. She took to checking the trees near her house at dawn, watching to see if the birds still lined the fence posts and wires. They did, mostly. But she noticed they never perched on the power line closest to her bedroom window. The morning she found a dead sparrow beneath that wire, its body stiff and strangely unmarked. She packed her equipment and didn't unpack it again until she was back in the city. She never submitted the Hollow Field recordings as part of her research. Officially, they didn't exist. Privately, she kept them on an encrypted drive she rarely dared to open. Because every time she did, the silence seemed a little deeper. Once, months later, curiosity won again. She opened the oldest file, the first one she'd made in the field, and played it through high-quality headphones. 3 minutes of perfect nothing. Then the faint exhale. Except this time, under the exhale, she heard something else, her own voice. Not from that day, she hadn't spoken then, but from a different recording entirely, a field note she'd made near the creek weeks later. "This is Rachel Hart, test 19, riparian zone." The sentence cut off abruptly. The second half of it, her voice saying, "riparian zone," played instead on the Hollow Field file, distorted and stretched, as if the silence had sucked it out of the other recording and tried it on for size. Rachel's hands shook so badly she nearly crushed the headphones. It wasn't just birds and wind Hollow Field collected, it was sound. Any sound. All sound. Given enough contact, enough overlap, it could reach out and take pieces from elsewhere, maybe even from people. She moved apartments again. This time she chose a place surrounded by city noise, sirens, shouting, buses braking, music leaking through walls. She slept with the window open, letting the chaos in. It made it easier not to notice the occasional thin slice of perfect quiet that slipped through, like a mouth opening in the middle of a scream. Locals around Miller's Run still tell stories about Hollow Field. They warn kids not to play there, tell each other not to drive that road with the radio off. Some swear the field has grown over the years, the edges creeping closer to the nearest farm. Farmers report new patterns too, flocks of birds flying in wide arcs around places that used to be safe, leaving blank holes in the sky that match blank patches on audio maps. And on the very rare nights when the wind is just right, a few people claim that if you stand near the rusted gate and listen, not with your ears, but with that animal part of your mind that still remembers what a predator feels like, you can hear something breathing out there in the grass. Not loud, not aggressive, just patient. If you ever find a place where the world suddenly goes quiet, no birds, no bugs, no distant hum of life, turn around. Don't test it. Don't speak into it. Don't try to record it. Because once a silence learns the shape of your voice, it might decide it wants to keep a piece of you. And the next time you wake up in the middle of the night, in a room miles away, and realize you can't hear your own heartbeat, you may discover that the field where birds don't sing was never just a place. It was a hunger. And wherever you go, it's still listening.